everyone, welcome to Uz Report World News and my name is Davron Jumayev. Uzbek President Shavkat Mirziyoyev and his Afghan counterpart Ashraf Ghani have agreed to seek international support for the construction of the trans-Afghan railway corridor. During a phone conversation on Wednesday, the two presidents agreed to send a joint appeal to leading countries in the world and international financial institutions for supporting the practical implementation of the project for the construction of the trans-Afghan railway corridor. Despite the COVID-19 pandemic, trade turnover between the two countries has grown significantly, and the International Trade Center set up near the border has created unique opportunities for entrepreneurs from both countries. On the same day, President Mirziyoyev received a delegation of the Russian Federation headed by Deputy Head of the Presidential Administration Dmitry Kozak, who arrived in Uzbekistan on a working visit. According to Mirziyoyev, the fruitful dialogue at the highest level has ensured the dynamic development of the Uzbek-Russian multifaceted cooperation in recent years. Dmitry Kozak sincerely thanked the leader of Uzbekistan for the warm welcome and conveyed greetings and best wishes of Russian President Vladimir Putin. The parties, among other things, touched upon issues related to the preparation and holding of upcoming summits in both bilateral and multilateral formats. Uzbekistan will receive observer status in the Eurasian Economic Union. In December this year, Director of Department of the Ministry of Industry and Trade of Russia, Mikhail Anisimov, said on December the 2nd.
The President of Uzbekistan earlier noted that joining the Eurasian Economic Union should meet the interests of the people, and this issue should be considered by the parliament. In May of this year, the senators approved Uzbekistan's cooperation with the Eurasian Economic Union as an observer state by a majority vote. 71 senators supported the initiative. 16 people voted against. Mirziyoyev, in his address in January, stressed that the country's accession into integration associations doesn't mean the loss of Uzbekistan's independence and should meet the interests of the people. Meanwhile, the deputy chairman of the Senate of Uzbek Parliament, Sadiq Safayev, as part of his speech at the Washington Atlantic Council in November, said that Uzbekistan's accession into the World Trade Organization causes less controversy in society than joining the Eurasian Economic Union.
Uzbekistan has, a part of its draft 2021 citizens budget, published a list of the 20 largest taxpayers in the country. Their tax payments are to cover 47.3% of the country's 2021 state budget revenues. The top 20 is headed by Navoi Mining and Metallurgical Complex. The plant's tax payments next year will amount to 20.1% of tax revenues. Al-Malik Mining and Metallurgical Complex will provide 6.4%, while oil and gas company Uzbekneftgaz will cover to 5.1%. The group of major taxpayers also includes Uztransgaz, Lukoil, Uzbekenergo, Uzbat and Uzauto Motors. According to the data of the Anti-Monopoly Committee of Uzbekistan, as of November the 1st, 2020, there were 131 natural monopolies in the country, the minimum value since 2017.
Natural monopolies are enterprises united by a single sales organization, the state of the commodity market. The registry changes every year for different reasons. For example, several companies engaged in natural gas transportation had left the list in 2018, whereas in the middle of this year, several companies from different areas were added to the list. In the summer of 2020, the number of natural monopolies increased. 5 new companies were added, but by November, their number declined again. In October this year, President Shavkat Mirziyoyev unveiled the biggest yet privatization program, which provides for the sale of shares at 620 state-owned companies.
The provision of people with medicines is one of the biggest challenges of today, especially taking into account the ongoing pandemic. What is the situation in Uzbekistan? There are quite a few cases of artificially inflated prices in pharmacies. At a press conference held on Wednesday, specialists of the company Dori Darmon tried to answer these questions.
A decree of the Cabinet of Ministers has compiled a list of 13 categories of citizens who are provided with preferential medicines and medical devices on an outpatient basis. Over the past 10 months of this year, these categories of citizens have been provided with free medicines worth 12.8 billion soms. The Anti-Monopoly Committee is responsible for determining the prices of medical devices and conducting planned work on this issue. To claim that a particular pharmacy overstates prices, you need a reason. A presidential decree adopted in 2016 clearly defines the limit of a markup that can be added in the chain of wholesale and retail prices, as well as prices in social pharmacies. Dore Darmon is the main supplier of medical institutions included in the system of the Ministry of Health. Over the past 10 months of this year, the company supplied $17 million worth medicines. The event also saw journalists' questions. One of them was about the qualification level of specialists engaged in this sphere. Our pharmacies also sell psychotropic drugs, and therefore all specialists have higher degree. Meanwhile, at some small pharmacies, we can see employees with secondary special education.
This may be the most important speech I've ever made.
President Donald Trump posted a surprise 46-minute-long speech on social media Wednesday, repeating his baseless claim that the presidential election was stolen from him, offering no actual evidence to support what he called tremendous voter fraud, and even alleged that the winner of the election, President-elect Joe Biden, knew the outcome in advance.
My opponent was told to stay away from the election. Don't campaign. We don't need you. We've got it. This election is done. In fact, they were acting like they already knew what the outcome was going to be.
The president's comments, delivered in the diplomatic room of the White House in front of the presidential seal, came one day after Trump's own attorney general, who is seen as loyal to the president, said that there was no evidence of widespread voter fraud that could change the outcome of the election.
Coordinated assault and siege.
It also came after Wisconsin Governor Tony Evers said this week that the Trump campaign's efforts in his state to challenge the election were, quote, nothing less than an assault on American democracy. But that didn't stop the president nor his advocates.
Massive shooting.
Trump campaign attorneys Rudy Giuliani and Jenna Ellis spoke before a Republican-led legislative committee in Michigan on Wednesday evening, bringing with them a Detroit poll worker whose claims of voter fraud were rejected by a judge last month.
Why are we listening to your story here today if it has already been ruled incorrect and not credible by a judge in court?
It has not been ruled.
It has. Well,
Okay.
This is not a courtroom, Mr.
Representative,
Giuliani. This is a committee. Why do you keep objecting to what I'm saying here?
Representative,
In Georgia, lawyer Sidney Powell, who was dismissed unceremoniously from Trump's legal team last week, claimed at a rally-like press conference on Wednesday that the latest recount done in the state was conducted by and corrupted by computers. Gabriel Sterling, who manages Georgia's voting system, said Sidney Powell's claims were patently false. Trump's various claims of voter fraud have gained traction among his followers, helping to raise as much as $170 million for an election defense fund that can be used for a wide variety of future political activities, including another run for the White House.
The U.S. House has passed a law to put Chinese companies under closer scrutiny and could see them delisted if they don't follow tighter rules. The bill gives President Donald Trump another tool to threaten Beijing with as he approaches his final weeks in office, and clearing the House makes it almost certain it will become law. It would bar any foreign companies from listing on a U.S. exchange if they fail to disclose ties to foreign governments. But the legislation is intended to target Chinese companies such as Alibaba, tech firm Pinduoduo, and oil giant PetroChina. The Chinese embassy in Washington did not immediately respond to a request for comment. However, before the vote, Chinese Foreign Ministry spokeswoman Hua Chunying called it a discriminatory policy that politically oppresses Chinese firms. Measures taking a harder line on Chinese business and trade practices generally pass Congress with large margins. Both Democrats and Trump's fellow Republicans echo the president's hard line against Beijing. Democratic Senator Chris Van Hollen, a co-author of the bill, said in a statement that American investors, quote, have been cheated out of their money after investing in seemingly legitimate Chinese companies that are not held to the same standards as other publicly listed companies. The Holding Foreign Companies Accountable Act is now headed to Trump, who is likely to sign it into law.
2020 is on track to be the second hottest year on record behind 2016. 5 datasets currently place 2020, a year characterized by heat waves, droughts, wildfires, and raging hurricanes, as the second warmest since records began in 1850, according to the World Meteorological Organization, a UN agency, in a report on Wednesday. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres said in a speech to Columbia University Wednesday that human-caused greenhouse gas emissions are to blame and policies have yet to rise to the challenge.
To put it simply, the state of the planet is broken. Dear friends, humanity is waging war on nature. This is suicidal. Nature always strikes back, and it is already doing so with growing force and fury. This is an epic policy test, but ultimately, this is a moral test.
The U.S. report said extreme heat stoked wildfires this year across Australia, Siberia, and the United States, sending smoke plumes around the globe. Less visible was a surge in marine heat to record levels, with more than 80% of the global ocean experiencing a heat wave.
A group of US states is investigating Facebook over concerns it wields too much power. Reuters sources say the states, led by New York, plan to file a lawsuit against the social media giant next week over potential antitrust violations. It's not clear what will be in the lawsuit, but Facebook has previously been accused of stifling competition by buying small potential rivals at a premium price. These include Instagram in 2012 and WhatsApp in 2014. Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg did not respond to requests for comment, but he has previously argued that the company has a range of competitors. He's also defended the acquisition, saying he helped smaller tech firms grow into powerhouses. According to a source, more than 40 states are planning to sign on to the lawsuit against Facebook. US tech firms have faced increasing scrutiny over their size and power in recent years. If confirmed, this complaint would be the second major lawsuit filed against a big tech company this year. The Justice Department sued Alphabet's Google in October for antitrust violations, accusing it of illegally using its market muscle to hobble rivals.
48 NBA players tested positive for COVID-19, the league said on Wednesday. It had tested hundreds of players as part of what it's calling an initial return to market testing phase. The players are returning to their teams' home markets to get ready for the 2020-2021 season set to start later this month. The league's only non-U.S. team, the Canadian Toronto Raptors, are the exception. They face tight international travel restrictions and will start the season in Tampa, Florida. Across the NBA, individual player workouts start this week and group workouts begin Sunday. Last season's bubble environment at Walt Disney World faced few issues protecting players and staff from the coronavirus. But the upcoming season faces many of the same challenges as other sports leagues in a landscape thoroughly upended by the pandemic. Both the National Football and Baseball leagues grappled with game postponements and positive COVID-19 cases as athletes traveled from city to city. Hospitalizations in the U.S. hit a record number for a fourth consecutive day this week as COVID-19 cases soar.
A modest late-day rally helped the S&P 500 set an all-new record closing high. The Dow rose 59 points, the S&P 500 was nudged 6 points higher, but the Nasdaq dipped 5. Rehan Horgan is CEO of retirement planning app Silver.
What's continuing to drive sentiment today is a combination of good news around virus, but also questions around growth in the economy. And so when the continued questions around growth in the economy are out there, what we're seeing is this continued pressure on interest rates. The bad news, if you're a saver, is that means lower yields on your investments. But the good news is that for those of you that owned homes, you are getting another bite at the apple to refinance that mortgage.
Signs of a slowdown in hiring kept a lid on market enthusiasm. Private companies hired a fewer than expected 307,000 new workers last month, according to payroll company ADP. November's hiring numbers are the latest sign of an economy that is losing momentum, with states adopting new restrictions as the global health crisis rages on. Some investors hope weaker job numbers will put pressure on Congress to pass an economic stimulus package before the year is out. In Wednesday testimony before the House Financial Services Committee, Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin once again urged Congress to focus on getting help out as fast as possible, utilizing the already established Paycheck Protection Program, or PPP.
My single highest priority would be to activate the $140 billion in PPP funds that are not spent, that we could immediately send out to the hardest hit small businesses whose revenue is down dramatically. I also think Congress should consider extending some of the unemployment insurance programs that expire at the end of the year.
Pfizer was the big corporate story of the day. Its COVID-19 vaccine was given the green light for use in the UK, becoming the first of its kind to get approval in any Western country. Pfizer climbed more than 3% to a 2.5-year high. Its German partner, BioNTech, gained nearly 6% on the U.S. stock market.
Boeing's 737 MAX on Wednesday returned to the skies with media on board in its first public flight since being grounded last year after 2 fatal crashes. The American Airlines flight from Dallas, Texas to Tulsa, Oklahoma was part of a concerted PR effort to restore the jet's image following a 20-month ban, and for American Airlines to demonstrate the jet's safety ahead of the first commercial flight set for December 29th. Boeing's best-selling jet was grounded in March 2019 after crashes in Indonesia and Ethiopia killed 346 people, marking the industry's worst safety crisis in decades. On Wednesday, journalists in face coverings witnessed a comeback. It was the first time anyone besides regulators and industry personnel have flown on the MAX since the grounding, one that ignited investigations focusing on software that overwhelmed pilots. Critical for Boeing's reputation and hard-hit finances, the FAA last month cleared the jet to fly again, following design changes and training upgrades. But families of some victims have protested the MAX's return to service before a final investigative report on the second crash has been released.
These were the top news for today. Stay safe and goodbye.